Hello students, good afternoon and welcome to English class. Today I'm going to be explaining the passage titled Challenges Posed by Migration. Alright, now basically what is migration? We need to look at migration from the angle of people moving from a geographical location to another geographical location with the aim or with the intention of settling down in that in that particular place they have migrated to, and most especially this sort of activity occurs with people who are not inhabitants, who are not inhabitants of such environment. So they are actually alien, that is, they are strangers, they are alien to that environment. Now I'm going to start with the explanation by putting across to you the most likely things that might occur in the process of migration. So that is what the title is all about, and what the content is all about. The most likely challenges, most likely issues, most likely negative impact such could have on either individual or on the society that has been migrated to. Now let's look at the first paragraph. Many cities in the world have now become overcrowded. Because every day people migrate to them from the countryside in search of work and better living conditions. This problem is far worse in third world countries, where the harsh living conditions and the lack of gainful employment opportunities in rural areas usually compel a ceaseless and massive rural-urban drift. Now, the first paragraph introduces us to the complexity of migration, which is actually the idea of overcrowding an environment or a place by a group of people. And then this exposes us, the first paragraph exposes us to the fact that people who migrate are actually from the countryside. When we talk about countryside now, talking about, let's say, remote area, talking about villages, hamlets, remote areas that are basically not civilized, areas that are basically rural or not urban or not urbanized areas. Now people move from such areas to what? To the urban settlement. They migrate to the urban settlement. And now the problem is far worse in third world countries. Now who are the third world countries? We are having countries whose standard of living are very deteriorating, whose standard of living is poor, whose means of livelihood are actually appalling. So now the third world countries, where the harsh living condition and the lack of gainful employment opportunities in rural areas usually compel a ceaseless and massive rural-urban drift. So now the cause of this is the fact that these third world countries are lacking in certain economic functions, such as employment opportunities and other development. Now let's move to the second paragraph. This desperate state of affairs is not without its direct consequences for the cities. Facilities like accommodations, schools, facilities like accommodation, schools, hospitals, water supply, and public transport cannot cope with the demands on them from increased numbers of people, and so they are under severe strain. House rents soar astronomically, and so too many tenants crowd into inadequate spaces. Markets, streets, and motorways are congested with people and vehicles, and as the garbage disposal is inefficient, the garbage piles up everywhere, contributing to environmental pollution. Now, the second paragraph introduces us to the state of things as people migrate to an urban environment in search of job opportunities, in search of a good living condition, in search of a greener pasture, and the likelihood that such migration could hamper the already set environment, could jeopardize the serenity of the set environment and turn things around for the bad, for the bad, and especially for the inhabitants of the cities that are being migrated to. So as such migration happens, the schools suffer. The schools suffer. Accommodation is most likely insufficient. Hospitals become overcrowded. Water supply becomes inefficient and unable to satisfactorily go around. Okay, so now house rents soar astronomically. That is, the prices of things generally soar as people troops in, and then we have limited resources, limited goods. So people they decide to increase the prices of goods, and then the prices of commodities around, including assets like house or rentage becomes something difficult to access. Come to access. Now, the third paragraph. Okay, many of the migrants come to the big cities in the hope of finding employment. However, because the majority of them are unskilled workers or fresh school leavers, not equipped in any way for gainful self-employment, they simply end up swelling the ranks of the desperate unemployed in the city lives to daredevil robbers. So, most of these migrants are people who lack basic skills for survival. Basic skills for survival they lack, and as they troop into an environment, to a city or to cities, they tend to cause a drastic increment in the in the unemployment rate in such environment, and they are left with no other option than to join the ranks of desperate individuals who venture into unruly activities that could jeopardize the development of the city. Unruly activities such as armed robbery, kidnapping, and other vices. Now, the fourth paragraph says the devil, they say, makes work for idle ends. The devil, they say, makes work for idle ends. Now, this is an idiom which says that, which typically means people with no job or no means of livelihood are prone to indulge in all form of vices or any form of vices. So individuals with no job, with no sense of engagement, are prone to indulge in vices, and this could have a negative impact on the city life. Now, with no means of livelihood in the relatively more expensive cities, many of these disillusioned young people resort to prostitution, fraud, and crime in order to survive. No wonder the crime rate in the cities is forever rising, and there are daily reports of victims who lose their money, possessions, or even their lives. So that brings us, back to the negative effect of migration. It basically could swell the population, and in such case the unemployment is likely to rise, and not only rise but rise for the worse. Now, the next paragraph says, how can this deplorable state of affairs in the cities be reversed? Now, this paragraph is trying to proffer solution, is asking a question, and most likely going to proffer possible solutions to cause a significant change in the effect of migration on city lives and its inhabitants. Now, how can this deplorable state of affairs in the cities be reversed? Since the search for jobs accounts for much of the rural-urban drift, one way is to encourage creation of jobs outside the cities. For example, certain businesses such as banks and manufacturing industries could be encouraged to set up branches in rural areas. If rural dwellers have ready access to the same jobs they go to look for in the city, the need for migrating will be reduced. Now, the first paragraph posited that, or suggested that, one way to reduce or to ameliorate the effect of migration, or probably to curb migration into urban environment or into cities, is to provide or create jobs in rural environments, such that jobs that these migrants tend to go out there to seek for in the city are readily available in the rural environments they are in. So that's one of the solutions the writer has proffered. So let's move to the next. It should be admitted that in this modern age, life without basic amenities of pipe-borne water, electricity, good roads, schools, and hospitals is just not good enough. Many rural dwellers are lured to the cities because of the lack of amenities. So, providing them in these rural communities will not only contribute to stemming the tide of migration, but also create a favorable environment for investment. So now the writer also has suggested that it is incumbent, it is important and necessary that rural environments are provided. Rural environments are provided with necessary social or basic amenities for survival. That once these things or these amenities are provided in the rural environment, the urge to migrate, the urge to move from the rural environment to the urban environment will be quenched. Okay, now let's move to the next. It has also been argued that rural farming is gradually being abandoned to the aged. The primitive labor-intensive methods and the relatively low yields have made it unattractive to the youth who would rather seek their fortune in the cities. If farming is made attractive, for example, through mechanization, it will become another source of employment for rural dwellers and thus reduce the necessity to migrate to the city. Now, here the writer suggests that agriculture or farming basically should be made attractive such that youth can eagerly and keenly indulge in agriculture without overburdening or without placing the burden now on the aged, while the youths are busy finding their ways into the city for greener pastures. So the writer advises that the agriculture should be made attractive by introducing modern way of farming or modern ways of farming such that youths can gladly indulge in farming for the good of all and abandon or jettison the idea of migrating to the cities. Next says rural. The last paragraph says rural urban migration causes a serious population imbalance and has all sorts of attendant problems that can get worse if not tackled effectively. So the sooner a solution is sought, the better. Here the writer further opens our mind to the major concern, that is the very heart of the matter, that should rural urban migration continue ceaselessly, then there is going to be, or there will be a great disadvantage that such will have on what? On the rural environment, because people, inhabitants of the rural environment will move to the cities, and the city will be overcrowded, congested, and most likely be very unhealthy for humans to live in. So he further says the sooner a solution is sought, the better. So as we have come to the end of the explanation, I would implore you to go through the essay carefully. Study how words have been used. Study how words have been used. Read through carefully. Pay rapt attention to how the writer has used words. I want to believe you can read through now. Okay, I'm doing this so that you can take your time to read through the passage. Okay.